At my parents' anniversary dinner, my younger sister announced she was trying IVF one more time. Before I could even congratulate her, my mother stood up, raised her glass, and smiled. And my daughter, Savannah Brooks, has already agreed to pay the remaining balance. The entire room started clapping. I didn't, because no one had asked me. Then Mom leaned close and whispered, "You're single, Savannah. You can always earn the money back." She thought the $92,000 in my savings account was waiting for my sister. She had no idea that in just 72 hours, it was supposed to buy the life I'd spent 20 years giving up. My name is Savannah Brooks. My parents' 40th anniversary dinner was supposed to be simple. A private room, close family, too many flowers. Then my younger sister, Camille, stood and announced she wanted to try IVF again. I smiled for her. I had no idea my name was about to become part of the announcement. Before Camille could finish, my mother, Marianne Brooks, raised her glass. "And Savannah has already agreed to cover the remaining cost." The room erupted in applause. I sat completely still. I hadn't agreed. I hadn't even been asked. And somehow, everyone else already believed the money was theirs. I looked down and noticed a printed card beside every place setting. At the top, in gold lettering, it read, "Baby Brooks Miracle Fund." Below that, Savannah Brooks has generously pledged the remaining balance, $68,000. This wasn't spontaneous. Mom had planned the pressure in advance. Camille reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Mom told me you wanted to do this." Her eyes were full of relief. That was the first moment I understood. Mom hadn't only spoken for me, she had been promising my money for weeks. And my sister had believed every word. I followed Mom into the hallway. "What did you just do?" She smiled like I was overreacting. "You're single. You don't have children. You can always earn more." I stared at her. She had reduced 20 years of saving to money I apparently had no right to keep. Dad, Graham Brooks, joined us. I waited for him to defend me. Instead, he adjusted his cuff and said, "Let's not ruin tonight." That sentence hurt more than Mom's announcement. He knew she had crossed a line. He just preferred peace, as long as I paid for it. When I returned to the table, Aunt Denise hugged me. A cousin called me selfless. Someone said, "This baby will exist because of you." I forced a smile. Every compliment felt like another lock closing around me, because refusing now would make me the woman who took hope away. Exactly as Mom intended. By the time I reached my car, the family chat had already been renamed Baby Ellis Miracle Fund. Relatives were sending heart emojis, prayer hands, thank you messages. I had never said yes, yet publicly, the decision had already been made for me. At home, I opened my banking app. A security alert appeared. Someone had tried to add a new authorized contact. The request had failed. The name attached to it was my sister's. The attempt came through an old family email account, one my mother still knew the password to. This wasn't only emotional pressure anymore. I froze the account immediately. Then I opened the folder hidden in my desk. Inside was a signed offer for a 6-room inn on the Oregon coast. Commercial kitchen, owner's cottage, bakery space, and one deadline. I had 72 hours to wire the down payment. Mom thought my savings were waiting to rescue the family again. She had no idea. They were finally about to rescue me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I opened an old recipe book I'd carried through 4 different apartments. Something slipped onto the floor. A faded acceptance letter. 20 years earlier, I'd been accepted into one of California's best culinary and hospitality programs. I was supposed to leave in August. I never did. Dad had been injured at work. Mom cried every night. Camille was only 15. Mom held my hands and said, "Just stay 1 year. After that, you can chase any dream you want." I believed her. I didn't know. 1 year could quietly become 20. The following fall, Camille received a scholarship. It covered only half her tuition. Mom looked at me again. You're already working. Just help her this once. I emptied my education savings. Camille hugged Mom. She never knew where the money had actually come from. I took a front desk job at a hotel. It was supposed to last 6 months. Then a year. Then another. Promotions came. Raises followed. Everyone congratulated me. No one noticed. Every promotion carried me farther away from the bakery I still dreamed about. People assumed I'd forgotten. I hadn't. For the last 3 years, I'd quietly taken evening baking classes after work. French pastries, sourdough, coastal breakfast menus. Every certificate went into the same recipe book. While everyone believed I'd moved on, I was quietly preparing to begin again. The next morning, I met my best friend, Avery Sullivan. She smiled before I even sat down. The owners accepted your offer. I felt tears forming. The inn is yours. If the wire arrives within 72 hours. For the first time in years, my dream finally had an address. Avery slid a folder across the table. Inside were new photographs of the property, 6 guest rooms, a white wraparound porch, a restored brick bakery. Then one picture stopped me. The sunrise over the Oregon coastline. I whispered, I've been waiting for this. Half my life. Avery asked the obvious question. Why haven't you told your family? I laughed softly. Because every time I announce a dream, someone suddenly has an emergency. 3 years earlier, I'd almost bought a condo. Mom called crying. Dad supposedly needed emergency dental surgery. I handed over $18,000. The condo disappeared. The emergency never really had. That evening, someone knocked on my apartment door. It was Camille. She carried a thick folder from a fertility clinic. She smiled nervously. I wanted us to go through the payment together. She wasn't asking anymore. She honestly believed. The money already belonged to her. As Camille explained the treatment plan, something caught my attention. This wasn't the clinic she'd used before. The estimate included luxury accommodations, genetic screening, private recovery services, and a wellness retreat. I looked up. Camille, who chose this package? She smiled. Mom said, if you're paying, I should get the very best. I suddenly realized they weren't asking me to help. They had built an expensive dream, using my future as the budget. I looked at Camille, then at the folder in her hands. Finally, I said the words no one in my family had ever expected to hear. I'm not paying. She blinked. I mean, not $1. For a moment, she thought I was negotiating the amount. I wasn't. Before Camille could answer, my apartment door opened. Mom walked inside. She hadn't knocked. She smiled at Camille. I told you she'd need time. Then she turned toward me. So, have you come to your senses? I stared at both of them. This wasn't a private conversation. It had been planned. Mom had been waiting nearby the entire time. Mom folded her arms. You don't have children. You don't have a husband. What exactly are you saving $92,000 for? The room became silent. For 20 years, I'd answered every question she asked. This time, I didn't hesitate. My own life. Her smile disappeared. Mom laughed. Your own life? What does that even mean? Without saying a word, I walked into my office, then returned carrying a thick blue folder. I placed it on the coffee table. I think it's time everyone saw this. Neither of them realized their version of family history was about to fall apart. Inside the folder were receipts, canceled checks, wire confirmations, medical invoices, college tuition payments, property taxes, car loans, wedding deposits, page after page, every emergency I'd quietly paid for. The total appeared on the last sheet. $146,382. Camille stared at the number. She whispered, "That's impossible." I quietly answered, "No, that's my 20s." I slid one receipt toward Camille. "Recognize this?" She looked closely. Her freshman year tuition, paid in full. The payer's name wasn't Mom. It wasn't Dad. It was mine. She slowly looked up. "Mom always told me. They paid for college." I looked at Mom. She couldn't meet either of our eyes. Then I pulled out another document. Camille's wedding venue deposit. Another one, for her first apartment. Then another, covering 6 months of rent when Mark lost his job. Camille kept shaking her head. "I never knew. You weren't supposed to." Mom finally interrupted. "I was protecting the family." I quietly replied, "No. You were protecting the story." Just then, the front door opened again. Mark walked inside. He looked annoyed. "I heard you're humiliating Camille over money." I calmly invited him to sit down. Then I asked one simple question. "If your finances are stable, why couldn't you qualify for IVF financing?" His expression changed immediately. For the first time, he looked nervous. "If you believe honesty matters more than appearances, comment, 'The truth costs less.'" Mark forced a smile. "It was just one small credit issue." I reached into the folder again. Jenna had helped me review the clinic paperwork. The financing denial listed something very different. Multiple revolving accounts, collection notices, outstanding judgments. This wasn't one mistake. Someone had been hiding a financial disaster. I quietly slid one final document across the table. Mark looked down, then immediately looked away. Nearly $74,000 in gambling and sports betting debt. Camille grabbed the paper. Her hands started shaking. "You told me." "It was medical bills." Mark said nothing. For the first time, the IVF wasn't the biggest secret in the room. My family had been asking me to sacrifice my future to cover someone else's lies. Camille stared at the debt papers, then slowly looked at Mark. "You lied to me." Mark immediately shook his head. "I was trying to fix it before you found out." "You would have panicked." Camille's voice cracked. "So instead, you let my sister become your solution?" For the first time, she wasn't defending him. The next morning, I received a call from Dr. Allison Reed. Camille had asked for another consultation. The doctor calmly explained, "There are several treatment options. The $70,000 package isn't medically necessary." I frowned. "Then why was it recommended?" She hesitated. "It wasn't recommended by us. Someone else had pushed for it." Later that afternoon, Camille called me crying. She had spoken to the clinic herself. Mom's longtime friend had referred them to the luxury fertility program. Not the clinic, not the doctor. Mom. She had chosen the most expensive plan before anyone even discussed the medical options. This had never been about healthcare. It had become another family project, funded by my savings. That evening, Dad asked to meet me alone. He looked exhausted, then quietly admitted, "I knew your mother planned the announcement." I stared at him. "You knew?" He nodded. "I didn't stop her." I asked the question I'd carried for years. "Why?" He whispered, "She was afraid. You were finally leaving." I froze. I never told Mom about the inn. Dad slowly reached into his jacket, then handed me a folded brochure. The Oregon coast. The exact property I'd planned to buy. Mom had found it weeks earlier, inside my car. She never mentioned it. Instead, she built another family emergency. She wasn't trying to save Camille. She was trying to stop me from leaving. On my way home, I decided to verify something. 3 years earlier, Mom claimed Dad needed emergency dental surgery. I'd given her $18,000. I called the dental office. After reviewing the records, the billing manager quietly said, "Insurance covered almost everything." The remaining balance was just over $4,000. I couldn't speak. $14,000 had disappeared. The next morning, I confronted Mom. "What happened to the rest of the money?" She didn't answer. Camille did. She suddenly remembered. The exact same month, she and Mark made the down payment on their first house. Mom finally whispered, "I only wanted to help them get started." I laughed. Not because it was funny, because I finally understood. I'd already bought my sister a house. I just hadn't known it. Camille burst into tears. "Mom told me Dad used retirement money." She looked at me. "It was yours, wasn't it?" I nodded. She covered her face. Every milestone she'd celebrated had been built on sacrifices she never knew I'd made. For the first time, she wasn't angry with me. She was questioning everything she'd been told. The 72-hour deadline arrived. I sat inside my bank. The manager asked, "Are you ready to proceed?" I smiled. For 20 years, I've paid for everyone else's future. Then I signed the authorization. $92,000 left my account. Not for IVF. Not for another family rescue. For me. The inn was officially mine. Less than an hour later, Mom called. "I've changed my mind. We'll figure something else out. Just don't send the money." I quietly looked at the confirmation receipt. "It's already gone," she gasped. "You chose a building. Over your own sister." I calmly replied, "No. I finally chose the life. You kept asking me to postpone." For the first time in 20 years, there was no emergency big enough to stop me. The morning after I bought the inn, our family group chat exploded. Mom had already posted, "Harper abandoned her sister. She chose a business over a baby." Within minutes, relatives started replying, "I can't believe she'd do this. So selfish." Nobody asked me what actually happened. They simply accepted Mom's version. Then, for the first time in 20 years, I decided not to stay silent. Instead of defending myself, I uploaded one PDF. Nothing emotional. Just facts. Every tuition payment. Every medical bill. Every emergency transfer. Every canceled check. Every receipt. The total appeared on the final page, $153,482.67. No explanation. No accusation. Just numbers. The group chat became completely silent. An hour later, Dad came to my apartment alone. His eyes were red. I should have stopped this years ago. He admitted something I'd never expected. Every time I'd tried to leave, Mom panicked. She believed if I moved away, the family would fall apart. So instead of asking me to stay, she created another emergency. Dad lowered his head. I kept choosing peace. But peace for us cost you your life. For the first time, he stopped protecting Mom. A week later, Camille called. "I've postponed IVF." I stayed quiet. Then she added, "Not because of money. Because I don't even know what decisions I've actually made for myself." She had separated her finances from Mark, started individual counseling, and scheduled a meeting with a different fertility specialist. Not because I asked her to, because she wanted one decision that truly belonged to her. If you've ever had to choose yourself after years of choosing everyone else, comment "my turn." Mark tried calling me several times. Eventually I answered, "I'm sorry. I never wanted this." I calmly replied, "You didn't want consequences. That's different." A month later, Camille filed for a legal separation while they untangled their finances. She told him, "I wanted a child, not a marriage built on lies." For once, someone else was responsible for cleaning up their own mistakes. 6 months later, I unlocked the front door of my inn. The sign outside read, "Harbor Pine Inn and Bakery." The smell of fresh bread filled the kitchen. 6 guest rooms were ready. The small cafe overlooked the Oregon coastline. Then I walked into my office and hung one frame on the wall. Not an award, not a bank statement. My original culinary school acceptance letter, dated 20 years earlier. I whispered, "We finally made it." Late that afternoon, someone checked in. It was Camille. She wasn't carrying flowers or excuses. She quietly handed me an envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. I accepted everything Mom said because it made my life easier. "I'm sorry I spent years believing your sacrifices belonged to me." She looked at me. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to finally hear the truth from me." I nodded, then handed her a room key. "As my guest. Not my responsibility." A month later, a letter arrived from Ohio. Mom had written it herself. "I only wanted to keep this family together." I read it twice. There was still no apology, only explanations. That evening, I wrote one sentence back. "A family held together by one daughter's sacrifice was never truly together." I sealed the envelope and never reopened the conversation. One quiet morning, Mrs. Evelyn Hart, the woman who had sold me the inn, joined me for breakfast. She smiled. "You know, I almost sold this place to someone else." I laughed. "What changed your mind?" She looked around the dining room. "You didn't talk about profits. You talked about finally coming home." That's when I realized I hadn't just bought a business. I'd reclaimed the future I'd postponed for 20 years. On our first fully booked weekend, I watched families laughing over fresh pastries, children running across the garden, couples planning vacations. For the first time, I wasn't solving someone else's crisis. I was building something that belonged to me. People once believed love meant sacrificing everything. I believed it too, until I learned something far more important. Real love doesn't ask one person to disappear so everyone else can live. My mother promised my savings to someone else because she believed my future could always wait. She was wrong. The day I stopped funding everyone else's dreams was the day I finally started living my own.